today, UK-bound arrivals from South America and Portugal are banned following concerns about the new Brazilian coronavirus variant. The government also faces criticism for delaying the rule for travellers arriving in England to have that negative pre-departure COVID test. A policy that the Secretary for State, Grant Shapps, announced with us last Friday. Good to see you again, Mr Shapps. Thank you for coming on.
Sure.
We will come to the Brazilian situation in just a moment, if we may. Can you just explain to us, because we talked about the test for people arriving back into England and needing to have that negative test last Friday. Why have you now had to delay that to Monday?
Yes, we brought the law change in that I talked about last Friday, but we've provided a little bit of grace period, and that's because when we looked at the 200 different countries and territories around the world, all using different types of coronavirus tests, and knowing that, you know, Brits returning, for example, would want to be able to see which version they could legally use up to the correct specification, it turns out that there are so many different ones. We didn't want to sort of make criminals out of people just because they weren't able to guess which one had the right, what's called sensitivity and specificity. So that was the challenge, and we just given a small grace period until Monday morning to let people safely return and not create some sort of repatriation crisis, which would have been very undesirable, of course.
I imagine the frustration for people that have perhaps already had that test done because they knew they were supposed to be flying back today or Saturday or Sunday is that there's going to be people getting on that plane that haven't had that test. And of course, coronavirus, as one of your posters will say from today, travels too. It travels on the trains, it travels on aeroplanes as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing that's not been frustrating about coronavirus. I went away last summer with my family and sent myself home again within an hour because I took the country out of a travel corridor. I am the first to acknowledge that there are a lot of inconveniences with this very, very difficult to predict virus and lots of complications in terms of bringing in things like pre-departure testing. The most important thing, of course, of all is that when people do get home, if they're supposed to, that they quarantine themselves, because that is a 100% guarantee you're not going to pass it on. And really, really important, especially as we see our hospitals so full, 36,000 beds being used for coronavirus, and it's just so important that we get over this.
On that quarantine, if I may, Mr Shapps, you're absolutely right. It is a 100% guarantee if the people quarantine themselves, if they stay at home and they self-isolate, if that is the situation. We know that there are 9 million people that have flown into the UK between June and October 2020. Only 9,127 people have been checked to see if they are following those quarantine guidance guidelines to self-isolate. And of those, the police found that only 7,040 actually did self-isolate. So you're right. It is exactly the guidelines that we want them to take, but people aren't listening. You can't guarantee that those people are going to quarantine themselves. And from those figures that the police have provided, not many are.
Those figures are actually only very partial because, for a start, Border Force have checked 3 million people as they come in. Public Health England, who've actually had the responsibility, call at least 1,500 people per day. So it can't be 9,000 overall. I think what we're quoting there are some separate figures specifically from the police. Of course, I mean, you're right, like a lot of policing, it does rely on people doing the right thing, whether that's not breaking speed limits or indeed us all staying at home during this lockdown or quarantining. It does rely on a lot of people doing the right things. I have to say, actually, I've looked at the figures. Less than 0.1% of all our coronavirus cases are related to people coming to the country. And of course, actually, a lot of the time, they would have had coronavirus if they'd been here because they've come from places with lower levels than coronavirus than we've had of late. But yeah, you're right. Everyone should stick to the law. And in this particular case, not only you get a fine, you could end up with a criminal record if you don't do.
You say that the less than 1% of the cases because they've got it from abroad. But of course, that's the way it came into the country. Yeah, but that's the way it came into the country in the first place. And then you've got a highly spreading, which we're very concerned about, the Kent variant, aren't we? That was much more infectious. The South African one we're worried about, which is more infectious again. And now we've got the Brazilian one. So I think it's perhaps a little misrepresentative to say that actually it hasn't had an effect because it's the spread from that one person is all it takes that's caused all the problems here in the first place. We didn't have it at one point, didn't we? But just to pick up on quarantining, you made the point very clearly to us last week that one of the reasons why you hadn't rushed to introduce testing for people coming in from outside was because it was far less effective than quarantining.
But the problem is there may be a dispute in the figures that Ben had said and what you believe. Until we can guarantee that all people are checked for quarantining, then we are running a risk, aren't we? How many people coming in from South America that will be allowed to come in from South America, because there'll still be British people coming back in, even when you make those bans, can you guarantee that you will check so we don't get this new variant?
Yeah, look, first of all, I just want to reassure your viewers, there haven't actually been any flights from South America this last week, and now they're banned anyway. So we're not expecting people to come, not from Brazil, I should say, rather than the whole of South America. We're not expecting people to come, and when they do, if they do, they must self-isolate. What I don't want to do is create a crisis where Brits, for example, who need to return are unable to do so. That wouldn't help either. It would actually create a different type of crisis. But, you know, as I say, everything about coronavirus, there is no perfect, ideal route through coronavirus. We've seen countries that totally lock down their borders. I mentioned last week to you, America, 12th of March. They didn't let anybody come and go. Look what's happened in America. They've had the worst crisis of anywhere in the world. The most important thing we can do is give people those jabs. 3 million of them have gone into people's arms.
Which many people have saluted you this morning. We've had Labour, we've had all sorts of people saluting the way the vaccine's been rolled out. But just on the point of that check-in, you know, yes, they've been banned, and yes, you had to say that we haven't had any flights in for the last week. But what about those that have come in before? Are you confident that you've checked those?
Yeah, those people will all have had to quarantine by law, and they've been very.
They have been.
Yeah, well, first of all, Public Health England, as I mentioned, do thousands of checks a day, 1,500 per day. And people, you know, end up getting fines. They end up getting criminal records. But most people in Britain, just as with anything else that we do, you know, it's illegal to do all sorts of things. It doesn't mean that we don't do it just because somebody's not looking over our shoulder all the time. In the same way as, how do I know that you're keeping to the rules, or anyone watching is keeping to the rules of lockdown, which say you can't leave your house for anything other than 5 different reasons. We don't expect the police to be knocking on your door every single day to check. We expect you to take responsibility, and most people do. And I have to say, if we can stick to this, we're starting to see the total number of cases fall, thank goodness, but massive pressure on our hospitals. We've got 3 million injections in people's arms, more than France, Germany, Italy, Spain put together. If we keep this up, we can get on top of this thing with the vaccination programme. But it does rely on people doing the right thing, and we can't be watching everybody all the time.
No, and that's what we're holding on to. I'm sure you've seen the footage of Canning Town tube station from yesterday, 7 o'clock in the morning. You have a campaign starting very shortly over the next few days about coronavirus takes the train too. Absolutely jam-packed train. I understood that a few trains didn't turn up. Clearly, Transport for London are having issues with drivers who perhaps are having to self-isolate at home. These commuters can't do anything about this. They're being advised to wear face masks and to wash their hands and to not get too close to other people. What can they do? They've got to get to work. They clearly have to earn a living, and they clearly have no choice.
Yeah, I saw this yesterday. Obviously, it's a Transport for London issue directly, but immediately I saw it, I got on to Sir Peter Hendy, who's the chair of Network Rail, and asked him to spend yesterday finding solutions. And first of all, as you say, unfortunately, some drivers didn't turn up because of coronavirus itself. Today, timetables have been changed. Some trains won't be stopping in order to prevent the overcrowding. The C2C trains that run into Canning Town, their timetables are being moved. We've got British Transport Police down there. We've spoken to the construction company, because a lot of the workers are construction workers at that time of day, in order to get timings moved so people don't start to work at the same time. And I'm very much looking forward to getting a mid-morning report today, which I hope will show that those problems are not being repeated today.
Yeah, because undoubtedly there are a number of factors why that happened, but ultimately for the people that had to get on the train, they didn't have a choice. They had to get on that train. And when constantly we're being bombarded with images and important messages about staying safe, staying away from other people, wearing your mask, be careful because the coronavirus takes the train, don't meet up with people because it could end up costing somebody their life, it's a difficult message to take.
It is. I mean, but you're right. We don't want to see that kind of overcrowding. We haven't seen that because there has been the lockdown on, very light usage of trains going on. But there were a series of things yesterday I can see combined there.
What would you have done in that situation? Would you have not got on the train? Would you have stood back? What would you have done?
Yeah, I would encourage people not to get into crowded situations, and if you do turn up and turn up at the station, it may not have been possible for everyone because they may have stepped off the train and then found they were already in the crowd. But I do encourage people, if they know that that might be a hotspot, to avoid it. There are also a large number of apps. We've made a lot of data available. I announced this at the Downing Street press conference back in the summer. We've expanded the way that the data is made available, so you can look on a lot of apps and see the crowding as well. So lots of different things. But actually, I'm very much hoping those scenes won't have been repeated this morning, though I haven't seen the data yet. But I've asked Sir Peter Hendy to get onto this, and he has done, and he's given me a long list of mitigating things that they're going to be doing today for it.
OK. The Chief Executive Officer of the industry group for Scotland Food and Drink, James Withers, has estimated that seafood merchants are currently losing £1 million of exports a day because of the customs chaos due to Brexit. I'm sure you've seen the reports. I'm sure you've seen the fish that isn't getting where it needs to be going. I'm sure you've seen the damage this has done. And amongst all of this, Jacob Rees-Mogg made this comment in the Houses of Parliament yesterday.
We've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
I wonder how you feel a flippant, jokey comment like that resonates with those fishermen and fisherwomen up and down the country that are now struggling and losing £1 million a day in exports. How that resonates?
Well, I didn't see the. Yeah, I didn't see the context of the comments, but I do know this: British fishermen around Britain will know that they'll be keeping a lot more of their catch now as a result of the Brexit deal that was done, which is good news for them. And over the next, I think it's 5.5 years, the option for all
Doesn't sound like there's much good news for the £1 million of exports a day that is being lost now.
I was going to comment on that because we have seen some what I think are sort of teething problems with the. We know there's some extra paperwork. We know that paperwork will be required, and we've seen some teething problems, and particularly the Scottish fishermen, as you say. The UK government has given the Scottish government nearly £200 million to minimise the disruption and make sure that businesses are guaranteed to be ready for that paperwork, and very much encouraging them and everybody else to make sure that paperwork is ready. And I know that the UK government's working very closely with the Scottish government, with the fishermen, with the industry groups to make sure whatever these teething problems are that are creating this issue, that the correct paperwork's issued and they can get their fish exported, which is, of course, what we all want to see.
I suppose Jacob Rees-Mogg's flippant comment added to the criticism of Victoria Prentice, who appeared to say that she hadn't had the chance to properly read the bill because she was busy with the Nativity on Christmas Eve. I think for those fishermen that are losing that money, it doesn't sit well, does it? Let's be honest.
No, but the most important thing is there's been a lot of cash made available. I'm thinking about the £200 million for the trader support services, the separate £200 million that's gone to the Scottish government, and we're really keen just to work together.
But should she have read that? Should she have read that despite being busy on Christmas Eve? Do you think that was wrong of her not to?
I don't want to spend my time commenting on how other people spend their Christmas Eves. What I do want to do is see this problem solved and solved quickly. We've seen because we were told we'd see 30, 40 miles of queues and all sorts of different things down in Kent in particular, where those lorries have to go through. I'm actually looking at a picture right now on my screen of the live picture of the Eurotunnel entrance, and things are flowing smoothly there. We do need to sort out these one or two teething problems elsewhere, including for the Scottish fishermen, who we would absolutely need to get their fish exported, and luckily they'll be able to catch and keep more of their fish as well in the future. So let's get this whole thing worked out.